Hello, my name is Patricia Blue, and this is my video recording of my researcher engagement exercise number two, where I will be talking about my project for the DMIN program, which is the Institute. That is its current name. That may change as the process evolves. This particular document is submitted for Class INT 701, Theological Lab number one. So, my research study is about a program that I have dubbed the Institute. It is, as I conceive it, a consulting program that I believe will help pastors, congregations, and community organizations more clearly define their mission and purposes in the communities that they serve. The target area for this program is within a 45-mile radius of my hometown, Geneva, New York. I have many connections in the peripheral area with churches through my denomination and also just through fellowship, music, all kinds of associations. So there are many opportunities for connection with this program. The Institute is basically an informational program for churches in particular that are maybe struggling because there are churches experiencing varying levels of success and challenge within my own community. But then there are some churches that are wondering, which way to go. Maybe denominations or maybe church congregations have shrunken to the extent that, you know, you wonder, should you even continue because there doesn't appear to be growth? And then the link to that is, why is that happening? If you're in a community where there are people who are not engaged with other organizations, perhaps rather than looking outward at why people aren't coming in, it might be time to assess whether or not you need to look inward and see what you can put out there that makes you an attractive, viable organization to those in the community. So these are just some of the thoughts that have come to my mind. And it all started a couple of summers ago. I had changed from the church of my youth, my birth, and which is in my hometown, and started to attend a church in a city about 25 miles away. And the church it wasn't an overwhelmingly large church, but they had built a significant population and had a large facility with lots of surrounding land. And it's funny because the minute I got there, I started looking around saying, wow, I see nothing but potential here. And across the street, there was a housing development. So it seemed like there were plenty of opportunities to network with new people. And maybe some of those people were already members of the church. But the pastor began to talk to me about different things that, different challenges that they face there. For example, when he was appointed to that church, I think the church had in its budget about $65, and they had managed to parlay that $65 into a whole lot more, paving the parking lot, fixing the structure. It's pretty pitiful the way that the property was transferred to them. But young ministers will oftentimes say yes to new opportunities because that's the only way to really get into the fray, so to speak, particularly in certain denominations. And so, as I was looking around at the grounds and the facilities, I thought, well, they were at that time collecting canned goods to give away to families that came to church. And I looked at all of that land and I said, well, why aren't you doing a community garden here? And so he said, I never thought of that before. I said, well, you've got all this land. There are no trees, lots of sunlight. You've got water access. You've got everything except seeds and people to plant. And so we began to map out a community garden for that church, and there was a lot of interest. However, in the middle of the project, the pastor informed me that he was going to leave that church and return to his hometown community, which is the same as mine, and that he had decided that he was going to leave the denomination because the financial requirements were so extensive. So he wanted to let me know that because we had just really officially joined the church. And my response was, gee, if you had told me that, this was something that was on your mind, maybe I would have gone to a different church because I didn't come over here to have to join another church. So anyway, he had expressed to me that what he wanted to do was go back to Geneva because most of his members were traveling from Geneva to this church 25 miles away. And logistically, it just didn't make sense. So he decided that he wanted to go back to Geneva, and his plan was to just utilize the chapel at the colleges in the community as a temporary place while they looked for a permanent home. And why he shared this information with me, I don't know. I think he thinks I have wisdom and insight. So I shared with him that as a former employee of the colleges and an alum, that I didn't think that his plan was going to be very viable because there's a lot of competition for the use of the chapel. And at different times of the year, you may think you have something going on, but you're likely going to be bumped. So he began to look at other churches in the community, and lo and behold, a Lutheran church situated on 7 acres of nearly lakefront property. Their membership had dwindled down from a sizable population to about 7 people who were trying to keep this rather large facility going. As I said, it's situated on 7 acres of land with a sanctuary, a dining room, a restaurant, capable kitchen, um, classrooms, all kinds of facilities. And so they had been trying to sell this church for a number of years. And so he decided to enter into a rental agreement with an option to buy. And I believe that they have a huge parking lot as well, which is, very rare in our community. Most churches don't even have parking. And if they do, it's very limited. This is definitely a different situation. I guess the biggest drawback to this particular church um, is it's not really a church that people could just walk to. So you would need a car. It's not situated in the heart of the city, but sort of on the maybe about a mile and a half outside of the city. So you would need transportation. But that has not been a deterrent because since they opened last year, the church is just booming. It seems that the membership is engaged, new people are coming, and they have many new initiatives. It's a very progressive church, and yet they need help and support in determining what direction, their church is going to go in. They have people who are involved in mental health, youth services, and for all, I think that they are doing well, and I believe that he would agree with me that there is probably a need for more directed sort of services. So, you know, as I was talking to him about these things and looking at all of this land and seeing all of this potential, because one of the things that we had talked about before was the need for elderly housing for people who are aging out of church so that they don't have to go into nursing homes where they might suffer all forms of neglect and separation. So, wouldn't it be great if you could create a housing complex or maybe shared units of housing so that people would have proximity to the church and the church would have proximity to the people? At any rate, that's something that we talked about. And I know that there is interest in doing that as well as other things. So, as I was talking to him, a light went off in my head, just the way it happens in cartoons. And I was like, the Institute. Yes, you need to parlay all of that experience and information about process, resources, access. You need to share that with people who have ideas, visions, and dreams of their own about how they want to access their access and assist their communities. And, it's not going to do any good just sitting in your head. I've reached the point in my life where there's only one project that I have not yet done that my heart desires to complete. But as for the rest, I'm more than willing to share my experience and expertise with others who want to do similar things. So, this approach, in terms of the Institute, comes from my years of leadership within the community as the CEO of a not-for-profit organization, Community Unified Today, which during my tenure developed two subdivisions, completed probably 50 to 60 substantial rehabilitation programs for first-time homeowners, completed homeless housing projects, daycare centers, and even technology centers for people who had limited access to the internet and to digital services. Um, the other aspect, I think, of my experience, it really relates to my experience as a broadcaster for 30 years. I spent some years as a news director at a local radio station, becoming connected to what's happening in the community, having your finger on the pulse of what's going on, and learning the procedures and processes, which was only enhanced by actually going through these processes like planning and zoning and things on your own. So there's a great wealth of experience, and there's still a great many needs in the community. So this approach to me seems to be the logical progression to ensure that for those who desire to create services or programs to meet community needs that are consistent with their mission and purpose, um, that this would be a great resource and tool. So I am thinking that the Institute can really step in and offer some levels of support that are not currently available. And I really think that in many cases, churches and some organizations just feel boxed in. This is what we've always done. This is what we do, without really thinking about the needs that exist in the community and the way that communities are changing and evolving. So, those are things that I think I could be helpful with in terms of creating this institute. Now, how would I get the word out about it? There are any number of ways. I mean, first, I have many personal connections locally and, as I said, regionally. But in addition, I would envision doing workshops in specific churches just to kind of, test the waters and see who's really interested in taking the leap and doing something truly innovative. And in addition to that, participating in denominational institutes that usually take place during the summer where information could be offered to a larger group in order to cull from that, the interest of other churches in maybe different regions or within the target area that may have ideas or initiatives that they want to see implemented. So basically, the way that I see this working is that you network with people, try to get a feel for where they are, um, and then start really paring it down where through conversations with pastors, leaders in congregations, determine, or leaders in community organizations, where are you? Are you doing what, where's your mission statement? Where do you stand? Have you updated that? Have you looked at any community needs assessment to determine if you fit in someplace or if there's something that you can do or something, is there some burning desire in your heart that is not yet fulfilled? Those kinds of questions just to get the dialogue going could be extremely helpful in fashioning the Institute and preparing what I believe will be a curriculum that will provide training in specific areas, including, the proper IRS designation. Do you have a charter, a corporate charter, doing things like that, and even connecting people to support services, conferences, things like that. But in general, I think the main goal for the onset of the program would be to define the mission of the organization and an assessment as to whether or not you are meeting needs that you have identified, or are you aware of existing needs in the community or even within your own congregation that are as yet unmet. So those kinds of questions I think are critical for the very foundation of the Institute.